Okay, we're starting. Sometimes when I start playing, I just want to keep playing. That's a Eitan Katz Nigun. Nice Nigun, right? Beautiful. Okay, so I see Zahava's watching. Shalom Aleichem to Zahava. Maybe somebody's joining us or not. Oh, Yossi, Shalom Aleichem. And Yael might be online, and my mother who watches every week. L'chaim, Baruch atah Adonai le'melech haolam she'advan imo.
Amen.
And whoever else joins us. So, dedicating the class, Bezat Hashem, to Akiva, Moshe ben Reuben, and Chasha Shifra Halevi, of blessed memory, and to Aaron ben Chana Liba, and everyone else that needs a refuah, Bezat Hashem, and Parnasa, and Shidduch, and children, and a healthy birth, and everything. Bezat Hashem, the merit of learning from Rabbeinu, Rabbi Nachman, and we should have Yeshua. So we're learning from Torah Hay, and I'm going to skip over about 20 pages tonight. Now, they are all connected, and I'll give a brief explanation of what's going on in these 20 pages. I'll give a very quick overview. So the lesson starts off by saying that there are certain afflictions that people suffer, and they don't heal because of a lack of emunah. And Rabbi Nachman calls this emunah nefula, a fallen emunah. And from this emunah nefula, so it can be fixed. It can be fixed by getting advice from the tzaddik. Now, if the tzaddik is alive, so Gimel Tammuz, I think, is Wednesday night or Thursday, tomorrow night or Thursday night. Well, now it's Aleph, so it says Thursday night. Now on Aleph Tammuz. Tonight is Bet? No, I thought it was Lamed was before. Oh, tonight is Bet. Right, thank you. Very good.
Wait, so it's tomorrow? Or what?
So tomorrow night. It's a Wednesday night. Okay. Gimel Tammuz, which is the art side of the last Lubavitcher Rebbe. It's also, of course, all of the Rebbes were in prison and released at some point. So the Friedecker Rebbe, who was the father-in-law of the last Lubavitcher Rebbe, was released from prison. Also, I think around Gimel Tammuz, or was I don't remember, something like that. Gimel Tammuz for sure is the yahrzeit of the Rebbe. And so for the podcast, if anyone listens to the Hasidic Story podcast, I have a story that is out to finish editing tomorrow. Bezat Hashem. When the Lubavitcher Rebbe was alive, you could go and simply ask him for advice. And one of the Rebbe's things was not writing more than he needed to. Of course, he got thousands of letters a week. Apparently, they say in Chabad that he got more letters than the U.S. president. And that was in a time when people actually sent letters. I mean, now you would say, okay, I'm not so impressed. And I guess people would send letters to the president. I have no idea. So, for example, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, of blessed memory, he tells a story that he was offered the job of being a professor at, I think it was Cambridge or Oxford or one of those universities, or to be the chief rabbi of the United Kingdom. And he asked the Rebbe, should I be the chief rabbi of the United Kingdom? And the Rebbe did an editorial mark that changed it, I should be the chief rabbi. And that was his full response. He didn't write anything else. He just went like this, and the letter was sent back, and he understood that that was what he was supposed to do. Something interesting about Rabbi Sachs, I personally never got into his teachings. They were too academic for me. And I'm an intellectual. I'm happy to learn and read all kinds of things, but I'm not an academic. You write in a clear academic, academics write in a way where if you understand the words, you get a lot out of it. But you have to understand the words and the concepts and make connections. It's a certain type of way of thinking. One thing I did used to listen to some of his talks, and one of the things he said is that he was never a posek for halacha. He would never make a halachic decision because he knew that he was a Baal Tshuva. And he didn't grow up with all this Torah knowledge, even though he was a genius and he had a great mind. And anytime somebody came to him with a halachic question, he would send them to a posek. And he wouldn't do it himself. Which I give him a lot of respect for that, because it takes a lot of humility, especially when you're the chief rabbi, to say, I'm sorry, I'm the chief rabbi, but that you have to ask a posek. Now, the Rebbe also, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, didn't normally answer halachic questions, because he would say, that's a question for a rabbi, and I'm a Rebbe. So you can ask, what's the difference between a rabbi and a Rebbe? So sometimes a rabbi does play the role of a Rebbe. But a rabbi is really, in the Orthodox world, the role of a rabbi is to answer halachic questions and teach Torah. The role of a Rebbe is to kind of look into your heart and your soul and give you direction from a Jewish point of view. And that was what the Rebbe did. So for some people, just being in front of the Rebbe was enough, and for other people, having a chiddush with the Rebbe, whatever connection. So in our lesson, he says, you can come to the tzadi, you can get advice. You can also find advice from the inner places of your heart. He says the mind can get confused from thinking. The heart doesn't think, the heart feels. And if you listen to your heart, he calls it from the depths of your heart, so you can draw from those deep well waters in your heart, you can draw out advice, and help yourself to strengthen your emunah. Basically, the bottom line of the whole lesson, and he does start off by saying that the whole purpose of Torah and mitzvot is to build emunah, which you'll know because if you obviously Ari's been here many times, and people that are watching have listened to many lessons, we now have like a general picture of what's going on in the world, why were we created, what does Hashem want from us, and it keeps coming up again and again in Rabbi Nachman's lessons. He just never says it straight out directly, probably because for him it was muvan le'elav, it was a given. For us it's not. So the world was created, and we learned a whole lesson about this, with absolute free will, so that we can choose Hashem. That's, if I want to summarize it, that's the bottom line. Every time we choose Hashem instead of choosing nature, we're giving Hashem a type of pleasure, ta'anuk, even though these are all terms that we use because we don't understand really what Hashem is. Because Hashem wants us to choose to connect with Him. That's why He created the world. That's why He took our souls, put them in a physical body, in a physical world, with absolute free will. That's why the Holocaust can happen. Somebody says, how can a God who's all good make or allow the Holocaust to happen? I'll say, in a sense, made the Holocaust happen. Moshe, Shalom Aleichem, welcome. Grab a chair, consider a lazy chair, whatever's good for you. If it's uncomfortable, you're welcome to switch. No pressure. So really the question is, how can a God who's all good not allow a Holocaust to happen? Because if a God is all good, then good has to matter. And the only way that good can matter is if there's absolute evil. Because ze lumat ze asa. Everything is juxtaposed to the opposite. There has to be darkness for light. If everything was light, we wouldn't know what darkness was. If everything was green, we wouldn't know what red is. You have to have opposites. And, I'm sure everybody's played a video game. I played lots of video games when I was a kid. And sometimes played them as an adult as well. Not as much as I used to when I was younger. Imagine a video game where you get one life, and when you die, you're dead. That's a crazy video game, right? That's the game that we're living. We're living basically in Hashem's video game, in a sense. And we also have this concept, which is not related to the lesson, but something we've talked about before. How is it that sometimes you have a very high spiritual experience, you feel like you've gone up a spiritual level, and you maintain that level maybe for a few months, and then all of a sudden you have like this huge crash? It's because, just like in the video game, where you go up a level, and you lose everything that you had in the previous level, but now you're on a higher level, Hashem does the same thing for us. So for example, the first time that you keep Shabbos the way that you're supposed to, you're going to have a high spiritual experience. The first time you go to the mikveh, the first time you daven with tefillin, or daven with a minyan, or maybe even a whole year of it, whatever it is, it's going to give you a certain spiritual high. But then, that becomes your level. In order to get to a higher level, you have to continue working forward, working higher, going forward. And sometimes people give up, because they say, when I was younger I was holy, now I'm not. No, now you're still holy, you just have to work harder to reach a higher spiritual level. So the whole world was created in order for us to make this choice of connecting with Hashem. And the most important way of connecting with Hashem is through emunah, is through choosing to have faith in Hashem. Which means, for example, that you daven. Because if you don't believe that Hashem is going to listen to you, you wouldn't daven. But if you're davening, you believe that somebody's going to listen to you. I mean, if you're in school and your teacher's telling you daven, so you're davening because the teacher's telling you. But once you're out of that situation, you're davening because you believe that Hashem is going to listen to you. And that's a certain level of emunah. And when you choose emunah, for example, you have some problem, whether, God forbid, it's health or financial or relationships or whatever it is, and you turn to Hashem and you say, Hashem, help me. That's why Hashem created the world. For that moment. And you would think, what? All of this just for that? I like when complicated things are simple. And that's really what it is. The whole world was created for you in your difficulties to turn to Hashem and say, help me. And in your good times to turn to Hashem and say, thank you. Now you could ask, why does Hashem need that? What is he, an egotistical monster that just needs his ego fed all the time? It's in order for our soul to earn its keep. Just like somebody who grows up in a wealthy home, never has to work, never has to take care of themselves. They don't understand the value of money, and they don't understand the value of work. The soul has to come into a world with absolute free will in order to make these choices, so that it'll be worth something. Otherwise, it's not worth anything. Hashem created the soul, and Hashem says, I love you so much, I'm going to stick you in this crazy world and challenge you all the time. Problem is that nobody tells us that unless you grow up with it. You grow up with parents that are tzaddikim, and they're telling you all the time, remember that this food is from Hashem, and that everything is the kavod Shabbos, and giving you chizuk all the time, and encouraging you to have strong faith in Hashem. Then you don't know. You have teachers, and you have grandparents, and you have friends, and you have all kinds of people who influence you. And Hashem is just like, whatever. Hashem created the world, but my friend is giving me advice. Rabbi Nachman is coming to teach us, and this is what it means to be connected to the tzaddikim, that we have to remember to turn to Hashem. We have to remember to have emunah. And that is the whole purpose of creation, and that's why Torah and mitzvot were given, in order for us to have emunah. So that's this lesson in a nutshell. Then Rabbi Nachman is saying, okay, how do you work on that emunah? You learn lessons like this. You have plenty of opportunities during the day to practice, or to just actually do, because life is difficult for most people. I think everybody. I never met anybody who didn't say life was difficult. There are people who can deal with life better, are able to be happy, but everybody has big challenges in life. Everybody. So you could think, wow, Hashem must hate me. He took my soul that was in this pure, clean, spiritual place, and stuck me into this world. But really, that's Hashem loving you. You just have to now do the work of getting as close as you can back to that place while still being in this world.
But all those people on social media like Instagram have a perfect life.
Exactly. There's some trend. I don't even know where I saw it. Oh, right. I think I saw it on Instagram. So I have one of my teenage kids. I write to her on Instagram. So I saw somebody post real life versus Instagram, or maybe it was on YouTube, one of those places. And you see like, somebody cleaning their whole kitchen to make a video of them baking cookies, and then they take the camera and you see this huge mess over there. And I'm planning a YouTube channel, B'ezrat Hashem. I'm going to have to do that trick. But yeah, everybody knows that social media is not reality. And were these beautiful people to take off their makeup or not get dressed up nicely and show what their life really looks like, we wouldn't be interested in them. The same thing like with TV. Why do you want to watch a movie about somebody who's a wreck? So, curated content. Carlos is joining us. That was from curated content. Shalom to Carlos. Okay, so that's the lesson, and that's what Rabbi Nachman is saying. And then he brought in this idea, which really isn't the main idea, that these fallen fears, when they're lifted back up, they create kind of a rebalance in the world. Not fallen fears, fallen emunah, fallen faith, and that creates converts. And the converts come into the Jewish people, and rabbis who haven't worked, meaning the leaders of the Jewish people, meaning the rabbis that haven't worked on their ego, they're like really proud, like I gave the example of Barack Obama. Let's say he says, I'm now Baruch. And he did call himself Baruch, by the way, when he was running for election. He said, Barak means Baruch. That's Barak, not my name Barak, but his name Barak in Swahili. Like Mubarak, Hosni Mubarak. So he becomes a Jew, grows a beard, payas, tzitziot, the kippah, the whole thing, comes and moves to Israel, and there's pictures of Barack Obama sitting and learning Gemara. The Jewish people would be like, wow, how awesome, or whatever. Take the biggest non-Jewish name that you could think of, the what are their name? The Kardashians? This famous family. Kardashians, thank you.
Thank you, Moshe.
They all convert, they all become Orthodox Jews. So the Jews have a lot of pride. And this is not the fault of the converts. The converts come, the rabbis have this pride. The pride is then trickled down, which leads to people having inflated egos, which leads to, he said this leads to adultery. But really adultery means self-indulgence. That you feel so full of yourself that you're willing to do something like break a marriage. And then he said, what's the tikkun for this? So the tikkun for this, he said, is tefillin, and that's where we left off last week. What was the point of the tefillin? Tefillin are there in order to ground your thinking. The reason that kids don't wear tefillin until the bar mitzvah is because you're not allowed to pass gas when you're wearing tefillin. And that's an absolute rule. Like if you have a stomach cramp, you have to take off your tefillin. You'll see people will take off tefillin sometimes in the middle of davening. That's most likely why. And it's something that, because of the holiness of the tefillin, you have to show that level of respect. You're also not allowed to daven when there's a bad smell. But they're unrelated. So, he says the tefillin are there to ground you, and that's the idea of putting on the tefillin when we daven, so that it helps us to be more centered, more grounded. Now, we get a little aspect of that here in Jerusalem. We get it on Shabbos, we get it on certain holidays. There's a certain spiritual energy coming into the world on those days. For example, Hanukkah. Hanukkah is a holiday that happened, and then the next year, the rabbis at the time were on a high enough spiritual level to feel the spiritual light coming down. They said, how is it that on the same day, the same spiritual energy is coming down as last year? They said, this must be a day that we have to keep as a holiday. And that's what it says in the Gemara, that the same spiritual light came down on Hanukkah, and that's why it became a holiday. So there are these spiritual lights, you could feel it, you could feel its energy, and the tefillin is supposed to help us kind of a conduit to feel more of that spiritual energy, which will help us ground our thinking, which will help us reconnect with Emunah. Then he takes tefillin and goes these 20 pages that I'm skipping over, and he says, this is connected to this is connected to this is connected to this. So he starts with the shin. He talks about Hashem's name, and that's connected to shadim, which are like demons, and that there are angels, and that there's evil thoughts, and that Rosh Hashanah comes, and Rosh Hashanah is the big tikkun of the year, because Rosh Hashanah is the time that kind of we reset our emunah. He doesn't give any details to say why. I'm guessing Rosh Hashanah comes because we believe that whatever happened the last year, that's over, and now we're saying to Hashem, oh, there's a whole new year, you're going to write down some good stuff for me. And if you're at the point where you care enough to say that, you obviously have emunah, because otherwise you wouldn't even ask Hashem for them. This is Yom Kippur comes, Sukkot comes, and each of them he gives a deeper meaning to them. all of these things are coming in order to reconnect us with emunah, in order for us to realize that Hashem is running the world. And then we're basically coming, and then he has one more thing where he says there's the rabbi and his students that sit in yeshiva, meaning yeshiva, that they sit together, they come together, and that's another level of bringing clarity to your emunah. So that's more or less the pages that I'm skipping, which, is, I don't know, something 20 pages with the hotel, not actual 20 pages of the Likutey Moharan. And now we're continuing. לאחר שנתבהר כי על ידי לימוד הישיבה אין צריך לפחד מסילוק המוחין בשינה, after he clarified that through the learning of the yeshiva, one doesn't have to be worried or scared of one's consciousness leaving them when they're sleeping. כי המלאך חזק ומתוקן מאוד ואין לשדים כוח להתערב במלאכים, because there's the strong angel that's been already fixed and refurbished in a sense, and the demons don't have any energy to interfere with the work of the angels. יבאר כי אדרבה בעבודת השם צריך לסלק את המוח. Now he's going to explain that on the contrary, when a person serves Hashem, they have to toss away their intellect. כי יש בזה עבודה גדולה כמו שיבאר, because this is a very important type of serving Hashem, which he's going to explain. כי באמת, so I'll just say something about the angels. We know that, I think it says in the Gemara, that every blade of grass has an angel that hits it and says grow. It's from the Gemara, right? I mentioned it to one of my daughters yesterday. She thought I was talking about marijuana. I said, no, blade of grass. God bless her. That it hits it and says grow. Now, I like the concept of
they know the word grass.
teenage daughters, Baruch Hashem. Hits the blade and makes it grow, because Hashem, when he's hitting us, it's in order to make us grow. So we have these angels. The angels are not independent beings. The angels, and these are all spiritual concepts, are apparently nailed into one place, or like stationary in one place. That's how the angels work. I know that before we say Shema, we say V'ofanim B'chau Kodesh. So these are two types of angels. We have it right before we say Shema, that the Ofanim spin around in circles. So you have all these angels that are spinning around like crazy, and then you have Chau Kodesh. They're the ones that catch on fire and the fire turns out. They catch on fire and turns out. They're basically trying to inspire us that when we say Shema, we're going to have like this fire and this energy of the angels. Okay, so I'm just mentioning that so we have like a little concept of angels in our mind. כי באמת צריכים דייקה לסלק את המוח בשעה שעוסק בעבודת השם, היינו בקיום מצוות התפילה. So when a person is serving Hashem, you got to take your intellect, your mind, and toss it aside. And a person might think, wow, I need to be, really focused on all of the kavanot and all of the meaning and the intentions and the halachot and everything. He says, yeah, learn all those things before, and then at the time of davening, push them aside and serve Hashem without any intellect. The time that a person serves Hashem, specifically doing mitzvot and davening. כי צריכים להשליך כל הכוחות ולעבוד את השם בפשיטות. Because we have to toss away all of our sophistication and intellectualness and serve Hashem with absolute simplicity. כי צריך שיהיו מעשיו מרובים ממחשבתו. Because a person's actions have to be greater than their thoughts. And then he quotes, ולא המדרש is from פרקי אבות, ולא המדרש הוא העיקר. Learning is not the main thing, אלא המעשה, rather the action. And that's one of the problems with somebody who learns in yeshiva all day long, although they might know a lot of Torah. Really, ideally, they would spend half of the day learning and half of the day doing some type of chesed, and the other half of the day working to support their family. That would be like the ideal life. Okay, so we'll cut it in 3 parts or 4 parts or whatever it is. That a person... Oops. Can you open the door, please? Thank you, Ari. Yes, the lock closed. Thank you, Ari. Eliyahu Navi. Koch. Did you bring the right book this time?
No, I didn't. I just came straight from the shop.
Okay.
I went home.
That's also good.
I wouldn't have made it back to the...
Okay, so we were saying that a person has to serve Hashem with simplicity, to take all of their sophistication, toss it aside in the time of serving Hashem. And then he quotes, "Lo hamidrash ha'ikar ela ma'aseh." Not learning is not the main thing, but rather the action. We're saying somebody who sits and learns all day, it prevents them from action, and they'll have to find time to go out and do something in the world, so that there'll be an action. Because if you learn all this Torah and you never do anything, it's the tzaddik in pelts. That's what they call it. The tzaddik that has a fur coat and keeps himself warm. There's a famous story of the Baal Shem Tov. So the Baal Shem Tov goes to this Beit Midrash, and there's a guy who's an old guy who sits and learns, and nobody's allowed to bother him. So the Baal Shem Tov says, good, that's my man. Goes over to him, he says, Shalom Aleichem Yid. And the guy looks at him and says, what do you want? I'm learning. He said, Was machst du? How are you doing? He said, leave me alone. I'm learning. Nobody bothers me. And the Baal Shem Tov says to him, are you going to take Hashem's parnasa away from him? You're going to take Hashem's livelihood away from him? Because Hashem's livelihood comes when somebody asks you how you're doing, and you say, Baruch Hashem. And this guy said he never thought of that before. And he said, this is like a new concept for him. Now, meaning the point is not to sit there and learn all the time. Learn as much as you can, but then you got to go out in the world and help people or interact with people. If you're working in a workplace or with other people, you'll have plenty of opportunities to do mitzvot. If you're sitting and learning all the time, at some point you're going to have to go outside and do something. Otherwise, you're just learning. That's not the point. Now, in the old days in Europe, and I guess in the Muslim countries as well, there was always a rabbi that the community would support, who would sit and learn. And the purpose of the rabbi was to teach halacha, to teach the community, and to answer halacha questions. But there was one rabbi of the community. Or if there's a big community, there might be 2 or 3, but they're all supported by the community. And if there happened to be one Torah genius, so people independently said, we want to give extra tzedakah to support that genius. And what happened in the Haredi world today is that everybody is apparently a genius. So they're all sitting and learning. And it creates a problem because we know that the rabbis in the Talmud all had a profession. Shammai was an estimator. Hillel, what did Hillel do? Was carpenter. And then there's the Rabbi Yochanan Nassanlar. What?
Papa was a beer maker.
A beer maker. There you go. Everybody had a profession because these were the greatest rabbis. I'm all for learning Torah, yeah. What do you want to say?
No, it just made me have a thought.
Yeah.
Imagine if all of the Chabad movement stayed in Crown Heights and didn't go out and just learn.
So they would have stayed in Crown Heights if the Rebbe hadn't told them that you have to go out.
Right, just made me think about it that they...
Yeah. Look at Williamsburg. Satmar is a movement that doesn't reach out to people. They stay insular. Chabad has problems in the Haredi world. I know because my older daughters are Chabad, and I sent my kids to Chabad schools, so I was exposed to a lot of Chabad over here. Chabad is not considered really Haredi.
Yeah.
They're like modern Haredi. Now Chabad considers themselves Haredi. For them, there's no question. But the general Haredi world of these Tiernas they're like, yeah, you guys, you go out and you try to get secular people to put on tefillin. It's a waste of time. It's bittul Torah. Okay, anyhow, I want to come back to this point here that whether you're learning Torah all day or not, and I'm assuming none of us is sitting and learning Torah all day long, ha'ikar hu ha'maaseh. The main thing is the action. And so take all of your thoughts and your sophistication, toss it aside, and serve Hashem with simplicity. Bli shum chokhmot. So one of the phrases that my Chavuta likes to say, he says apparently in Breslov, this is something they like, Im chokhma ken chokhmot lo. Use your brain, yes, don't be sophisticated. Sophisticated is when you start to try to come up with a clever way of doing things. Don't serve Hashem with being clever, serve Hashem with simplicity. It says to give tzedakah. Don't think, I'm not going to give this guy a shekel. I'm going to help buy some food and bring it to his house. Give him the shekel, and then when you get a chance, bring him the food as well. But don't prevent yourself from giving him the shekel because you think you're going to help him in some other way. That's serving Hashem with simplicity. It says you have to daven shachrit, you daven shachrit. You could daven it sometimes with kavana, sometimes without kavana. You treat it in a simple way. I interviewed this Rabbi Cardozo. I forgot his first name. What's his name? Nathan Cardozo, that's it. Very nice guy. Really, really sweet and sincere guy. And one of the things he said in the interview is that he won't daven if he's not really ready to daven. He said sometimes he'll start mincha at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and he'll come 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and he'll put down the siddur, and he won't daven mincha, because the whole time he was waiting to be ready, and he wasn't ready. So that's serving Hashem with sophistication, and that's not good, because whether you're ready or not, you got to daven mincha.
Sounds like a perfectionism.
That's his thing. He's criticized left and right by people. He's also worshipped by a whole little cult of people. It's a whole group that loves him. But if we just take him as an example, that's serving Hashem with sophistication. Now, let's say he wants to be sophisticated. He wants to really get to that point. So set a time. You say, if by 2 o'clock I haven't gotten to the point where I'm ready to daven, I'm davening and bummer. I'm just going to have to daven without kavanah. Because you got to daven. That's serving Hashem with simplicity. And it's super important from Rabbi Nachman's point of view. It's probably like the thing. Serve Hashem with simplicity. Lo mi baya ein tzorech lomar chochmot shel shtut. We don't have to say foolish wisdom shel stam b'nei adam, just from anybody. Shemit chakmim b'shtutam. לתת טעמים למצוות ומסבירים את התועלת בעשיית המצוות. So you have people that will say, why keeping kosher came about? Because in ancient times there was a disease that pigs had, and so Jews were smart and they didn't eat them. And wow, I'm really glad that I eat whatever the national Hebrew national hot dogs, because it was discovered that the treif hot dogs have all kinds of whatever in them. He says that's not the reason to keep kosher. You keep kosher because Hashem said keep kosher. Don't come up with reasons. Don't come up with sophistication. What do you want to add?
That's why, with simplicity, grow your payas out and grow your beard out and wear it to hell.
If you can, there's Lat Hashem. It's not easy. I have a friend in the Shuk. He became a Baal Tshuva. It was amazing because before he became a Baal Tshuva, he was telling me about all the treif restaurants he wanted to eat in. And I didn't say anything to him. It was just like, okay, enjoy. Tell me how they are. And then, for some reason, he's just like, I decided I'm never eating treif again. He's just gotten stronger and stronger in his emunah. I see him every day in the shuk. Sometimes he actually tunes into the lesson here, even though I don't think he knows much English. And he started growing a beard. The beard's getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. This is at least as big as yours.
Oh, God.
I think even bigger than yours. He said to me in the shuk the other day that my wife is complaining. My wife doesn't like the beard, it's too big. So I showed him how I roll my beard. My beard is like probably twice as long, maybe down to here. My wife doesn't like my beard either, like that big. So I learned how to tuck it and roll it, whatever. So I showed him how to roll the beard, and he's like, that my wife would like. But it takes a lot of guts to grow a beard for some people, and to grow payas. I do have some hair here, but Chabad doesn't have long payas, so that's why I don't have payas like you. Well, I'm a student of Rabbi Nachman. I'm assuming the Alter Rebbe was also a student of Rabbi Nachman. I know the Lubavitcher Rebbe for sure studied the Likutey Moharan. There's no question. Okay, so don't come with just answers for why this mitzvah is done, right? For example, we know when it says don't steal, that we're not supposed to steal. But I'm not interested in stealing whether Hashem said it to me or not. Like, you don't have to tell me not to steal. So when you see something and you're tempted for a second, maybe I should take that, are you not taking it because you know it's immoral, or you're not taking it because it's a mitzvah from Hashem? You should not take it because it's a mitzvah from Hashem, not because you understand that it's immoral. That you understand that it's immoral is very nice, but Hashem said don't steal, so you don't steal. Hashem said don't eat treif, you don't eat treif. Hashem said here's how you keep Shabbos. That's how you keep Shabbos. There's deeper ways of keeping Shabbos. There's all kinds of minhagim. That's how you serve Hashem with simplicity. And to come and say, well, I don't follow shatnez because that came about from some cult in ancient Egypt, and I don't believe in that stuff. And I've met Orthodox, very intelligent Jews who talk like this. Why do you do that? Nobody does that. That's just because there was, at one point in Jewish history, here, for example, mitzvot. Why do every time I have non-religious guests at the Shabbos table, they want to know, why do we do mitzvot, the water that you pour on your fingers after Birkat Hamazon? The reason is at one point there was something in salt that used to cause blindness if you touched your eye with it, and the rabbi said, now everybody washes the mitzvot so that the salt won't get in your eyes. We don't have that salt anymore. You can take salt and stick it in your eye as much as you want. It's not going to make you blind. God forbid. But we still have mitzvot. We still have the haftarah. The haftarah was because there was a time, I think it was the Greeks, the Romans, the Persians, somebody was persecuting us, wouldn't let us read the Torah. So we were allowed to read from Nach. We weren't allowed to read the Torah. So the rabbi said, okay, we'll find something in Nach that symbolizes the Parsha, and then we'll remember what the Parsha is, because everyone will learn it at home, and we'll read the Haftarah out loud. Then when we could read the Torah again, we still read the Haftarah. And so you can say, I'm not going to read the Haftarah anymore, and I'm not going to do my Machonim anymore, because there's no reason for it. But there is a reason for it. So now we're getting into one step further. The rabbis instituted, I think it was 7 halachot. One of them was lighting candles on Friday night. And I have them written down in a Google Doc. I just can't access it now on my phone. Of these halachot, these are halachot that were established by, not given in the Torah, not given in the oral Torah, but the rabbi said, this is a halacha. you keep that halacha just like a halacha from the Torah. Now when it comes to sacrifices in the temple, which right now we don't do, there's a difference between breaking a halacha from the rabbis and breaking a halacha from the Torah. And I'm saying all of this because a person can be sophisticated and they can say, well, that's D'oraita and this is D'Rabbanan, so it's not so bad that I did this thing. That's serving Hashem with sophistication. And there's a point in serving Hashem with simplicity. You want to have emunah, you have to be able to serve Hashem with simplicity. It doesn't mean that you need to be simple or stupid. It means that you have to be able to be like a soldier in the army. The way that it works in the army, and they would work on you very hard, which was one of my problems with the army. They tell you jump, you jump. You don't ask. They tell you shoot, you shoot. They tell you go forward, you go forward. I didn't like anyone telling me to do anything, and in the army and I didn't get along so well. But I did learn from the army that that's how you serve Hashem. Hashem says do this, you simply do it. So even if you weren't in the army, you've seen movies of the army, you know what it is to be in the army, you have an idea in your head. That you read that it says, you have to give tzedakah. Even if it means giving half a shekel. And should you have 5 shekels in your pocket, you're still going to give half a shekel. Like if that's all you have to your name, it's 5 shekels, you're still going to give half a shekel. There have been times when I gave the half a shekel and that's all I had. That was the last money I had in the whole world at that moment. And it was so much fun to give that half shekel away. Because I was saying to Hashem, now I have nothing. It's completely on you, Hashem. You figure it out. And of course Hashem figured it out. That's emunah. A person who's sophisticated will say, well, the halacha says that if I don't have this and I do have that, be careful with the table because it moves people on the boat here. So I don't have to give this, I don't have to do that. Serve Hashem with simplicity. Ela filu chochmot gmorot, even established wisdom, kagon sodot Kabbalah, shegila arizal beinyanei hamitzvot, even like Kabbalistic secrets that the Arizal revealed regarding keeping the mitzvot, afilu mi sheyesh lo moach gadol be'emet umasig hasagot amitiyot be'avodat Hashem, even somebody who has a great intellect and is able to understand, for example, the Arizal, and all of these deep Kabbalistic concepts, shemagia le'eze avodah kagon kiyum mitzvot lemaaseh, when it comes to a type of service of Hashem, for example, a practical mitzvah, an actual physical mitzvah, utzarich lahashlich kol kochot, toss away all of that sophistication, v'gam eta dikdukim v'chumrot, and also the fine points and the stringencies, v'la'asok ba'avodato yitbarach b'pshitut, and to serve Hashem in the simplest way. This is what the Baal Shem Tov would say all the time. So there are stories of the Baal Shem Tov that he would lose his spiritual powers and he would lose his memory of Torah. And it always made him happy. So this was kind of like a punishment for the Baal Shem Tov. You know, here he was the greatest tzaddik alive at the time, and all of the spiritual powers were taken away from him. He's like, now I can serve Hashem like a simple Jew. Because in those days, they were really simple Jews. We have them here in Jerusalem as well. I didn't see any simple Jews when I was growing up in South Florida. They're probably there, but they're hidden behind some mechitza or something. Yeah, you know, I just don't ever remember seeing simple Jews. I'm guessing in Brooklyn, there must be simple Jews. Here, you see really simple Jews. It's like see people that are just not intelligent, but they say brachas and they serve Hashem with such simplicity. And there's something so pure and sweet about it. What he said, what Rabbi Nachman is saying is, okay, you're smart and you can understand all kinds of things. Now serve Hashem like that simple person. But do it from really a place of simplicity. Which means that you're taking all of your sophistication and you're tossing it aside. So there's a story of Reb Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev that he had a Baal Tokea, somebody who blew the shofar, who knew all of the kavanot. So if you look on the Machzor, you'll see there's all these combinations of letters which stand for Hashem, I think permutations of Hashem's name. words like permutations, I only learned when I became a Ban Tshuva. Auspicious time, these are words I never used in my life. Permutations. So those are kavanot, and the person who's blowing the shofar is supposed to know them and have them in mind. As they're blowing, they're supposed to picture the letters and see them. And so he had a Baal Tokea that knew all the stuff backwards and forwards. And it comes Rosh Hashanah, and he turns to the shlepper in the back of the shul, and he says, "You blow the shofar for the community." And everybody's like, "What? What happened to Moshe Gross?" Whatever the guy's name was, who knows all the kavanot. The Rebbe says, he's going to blow the shofar. The guy takes the shofar, he's not even so good at it. Whatever, the noise comes out, and everybody's like, "Rebbe, why did you choose this guy? We love the professional." He said, "There was a terrible decree against the community, and I needed him to blow the shofar." I said, "Okay, why him?" Because he has 7 kids at home, and they're starving, and I know when he blows the shofar, he's crying out to Hashem, "Feed my children." And the other guy, he might know all the kavanot, and this guy doesn't know any kavanot, but his prayer is going to be accepted over the guy with all the kavanot. So what Rabbi Nachman is saying is be the guy who knows all the kavanot, and then blow the shofar like the simple person. That's the balance. It's like when somebody is given an honor. It says in Pirkei Avot, somebody who wants honor should run away from honor. If somebody who wants honor, honor will run away from him. What happens if somebody calls you and says, "Listen, I really appreciate your 1,000 shekel donation. I want to invite you for a dinner, and I want you to be the guest of honor." So you can say, "Oh, me? I don't want to be the guest of honor," which is probably true. He says, No, we need you to be the guest of honor. I want you to come. And so you can say to him, "Listen, I'm willing to be the guest of honor. You want me to talk and I'll say something, but I'm not interested in you like praising me and making up all kinds of titles for me." And you go and you give your speech, and you do it from a place of humility. That's receiving honor with humility. If you completely deny it, then it's like somebody, like in Mea Sharim, on Chol HaMoed, they divide the streets, men on one side, women on the other. That never gives a man a chance to not look at a woman. Like one of the great opportunities every day for a heterosexual man is to not look at women. And it's hard. It might even be half a look. So you look and then right away you turn away. But that turning away is taking your eyes away from something you're not supposed to see. And that is what we're supposed to be doing. If you take away all of that, you don't have anything to work on. Okay, so that's where we're stopping with the lesson for tonight. Then I have a few things to share and a short story here, in the next 10 minutes. So there's some stories about kibud av ve'em, of honoring one's parents. So these are things that I read on Shabbos. Where do we learn the extent of respect for honoring one's parents? We learn it from Dama ben Nesina, who was a non-Jew from Ashkelon. So this is in the Gemara, in Kiddushin. We learn how to honor our parents from a non-Jew in the Gemara from Ashkelon. Once, while he was sitting in the company of Roman noblemen, his mentally disturbed mother approached him, tore off the gold embroidered silk cloak he was wearing, hit him on the head, spat in his face, and took a shoe and hit him. Despite all this, he continued to sit in silence. Moreover, and my mother, if she's watching this, don't do this to me. Moreover, when the shoe fell from her hand, he lifted it up and handed it to her so she wouldn't be upset. On another occasion, the Chachamim, the rabbis at the time, wanted to purchase precious stones from him for the ephod, which was where the Urim V'Tumim was written on a parchment. The gemstones were put on the Choshen, on the ephod for the Kohen Gadol, and he would ask a question to it and it would light up. So they wanted to buy those gemstones from this Dama ben Nasina. And they were willing to pay him a huge amount of money, but he turned down the offer because he said the key to the box that's holding the precious stones was under the pillow of his father who's sleeping, and the box was under his legs. And then Hashem rewarded him with a red heifer, para aduma, in his herd, and from that he became so rich that he made more money than he would have from the gemstones. So from there we learn kibud av v'en. There's another story, 2 more stories here, and then I'll tell you the story of the chidah, which was pretty shocking. Where is it here? Chazal warn us that even more important than the service we do for our parents is the way we do it. And they demonstrate it with the following stories. There was a son who took care of all of his father's needs, serving him the finest delicacies. Once the father asked his son, "My son, from where do you have all of this?" And he shouted, "Quiet, old man, just eat in silence like the dogs." Another man earned a meager living by grinding a mill, and one day the king's officers came to conscript his father for the dreaded rigors of their master's service. So I guess I have no idea what they wanted the father to do, but something that wasn't pleasant. And seeing this, his son told his father, "Father, you can take my place at the mill, and I'll do the king's service in your place, accepting any embarrassment that it would entail." So the first son served his father gourmet dishes that earned a place in Gehenom, in hell. The second son made his father drag heavy millstones, and he earned a place in Gan Eden. So it's not, it's not how much money you have or how much wealth you have. It's how you do the mitzvot. One of the things in giving tzedakah is you have to give with a smile. Your own personal test might be whether you want to give the tzedakah or not. I have that all the time. But when you give the tzedakah, give it with a smile. And even ask the guy, "How are you doing?" There's one guy, he's been collecting tzedakah for years. One time he came into shul, and his face looked like, I can't even do it. It was worse than this. Half his face, and this is a young guy, half his face is paralyzed. So I said to him, "What happened?" He said, "I don't know, I got some virus, and my face is paralyzed." I said, "Well, what does the doctor say?" He's like, "The doctor says it'll come back eventually." It took like a year. But every time I'd see him, I'd say, how's it going? Your face is looking better. He's like, "Oh, thank you for asking." And I give him a shekel. I don't even know the guy's name. That's also tzedakah, caring about a person, asking about a person. Okay, so the last story about kibud av v'en, and then the chidah. So somebody once asked Reb Chaim Brisker. Reb Chaim Brisker was known to be a very tough misnagid rabbi. Was he misnagid? Pretty sure. And I know one of the things that he taught was to say each word, and if you didn't say with kavanah, to go back and say it again. So you have people that will say Baruch Ata, Baruch, Baruch. You'll hear people davening like that, or Aleinu, L'shabeach, Aleinu, L'shabeach, and they'll keep going over it again and again until they say the word with kavanah. It's true that somebody came and asked Reb Chaim Brisker, "Is it true that the respect due to parents involves, if the respect due to parents involves some type of monetary expense, it's the parents' responsibility, not the sons"? Meaning, like, if you have to travel to Australia to visit your mother because God forbid she's sick, do you have to pay for it, or does your mother have to pay for it? And he said, yes, that's the halacha, that the parents have to pay for it. So the man continues, and he says, "Well, here's my question. My father lives far away, and I've just been notified that he's ill and about to die. And trust me, I want to fulfill the holy mitzvah of kibud av and to travel to my father, but what can I do? It's really far away, the train costs a lot of money, and my father doesn't have the money, and I don't have the money. That exempts me from taking the trip, right?" He says, "Right, it exempts you from taking the trip on the train, but you still have to walk there." So you still have to do the mitzvah, you just can't take the train because you can't afford it. Okay, so this is a story from Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu, who was known as, what was his name? Rishon LeZion or something like that. He was the chief Sephardi rabbi. Where is it here? Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu. Yael, you'll tell me if she's still listening. Okay, I think it's called the Rishon LeZion. He was one of the big Sephardi rabbis. And so you heard of the Chida. The Chida was Chacham Chaim Yosef David Azulai. And he spent more than 50 years of his life traveling around Europe and the Middle East collecting money. Now, he died in 1809. So in 1753, when he was 29, he went to Europe. And then in 1772, he went again to Europe. And each of these trips he went for 5 years. Just that blows my mind. The guy gets on a boat from Israel, travels to Europe for 5 years collecting money, and then comes back. He did it again in 1772. On his second trip, he remained in Livorno, Italy, where he stayed there for the rest of his life. Despite the honor that he was accorded abroad, he always wanted to come back to the Holy Land, but he died in Italy and he was buried there when he was 83 in 1806. So he was on one of these trips in 1772, and he was collecting, and he ended up dying, which 83 is pretty amazing in 1806. The average lifespan was 35. So to live to 83, that's incredible. And he was buried there. And of course, he was the biggest rabbi of the generation, and everybody gave all this honor. In 1960, they were going to build a mall in Italy over his grave. And so the Israeli government decided to exhume his body and bring it and bury it here in Har Menuchot, here in Jerusalem.
Why can't we do that with Rabbi Nachman?
I don't think Rabbi Nachman wants it, first of all. He wanted to be buried in Uman, and he was very clear about it. So I think it would be going against his wishes. And also, I don't think... I think it would be very controversial to move Rabbi Nachman.
But Koch wants him there.
There's plenty of tzaddikim. Plenty of tzaddikim here in Eretz Yisrael. So it was Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu, who was the chief Sephardi rabbi at the time. He went to Italy to supervise everything. They dug up the grave. They found the casket. They pulled it out. However they did it. They put it on a plane. And in the plane there was a lot of turbulence. And twice the casket fell. And it had to be picked up. And it flipped upside down. It had to be put right side up. So now they're here in Jerusalem, they're in Har Menuchot, and they're ready to bury the casket, which of course they didn't open. And Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu says, I don't think we should bury the Chida like this. The bones in the casket must be a mess. Because of course when they buried the body, they buried it where there was no issue. Now that the bones were all aligned, the body was aligned, and now it's a mess from all the turbulence in the plane. So they agreed, there was a big conversation, they agreed, and they carefully opened the casket. And Reb Mordechai Eliyahu says, Rabbeinu Achida, please forgive me if in any way I'm not fulfilling this mitzvah properly. And he reached inside to rearrange the bones, and after a few minutes, he was so shocked by doing this, he started trembling and closed his eyes. And then he said, I can't do it. And he said, Rabbeinu, please do, he said to the other rabbis there, please do this task because I don't want to mess something up. And then there was a powerful explosive sound, and the coffin started to shake. There was a terrifying rattling caused by the tzaddik's bones, striking the inner walls of the casket, and all the rabbis fainted on the spot, but Rabbi Eliyahu didn't faint, and he explained afterwards that the bones were banging and shaking around, and bone by bone, the entire skeleton rearranged itself perfectly. And then they buried the Chida. And you can go and visit the grave of the Chida, in Har HaMenuchot. Now, if this wasn't told by Rabbi Eliyahu, Mordechai Eliyahu, we probably wouldn't believe it, because it sounds like, some little kid's tale. But when you have a great tzaddik and a great rabbi who himself witnessed this, and he tells you this is what he saw, and the other rabbi saw it starting and they fainted on the spot, you know it's real. Now, what do we get from a story like this? It's a nice story, but what do we get from a story like this? We can easily forget that Hashem is running the world and that tzaddikim are real. You go to the grave of a tzaddik and you think, oh, it's just like a nice place to be. These tzaddikim are real. Hashem's intervention in this world is real. And the power of being connected to the tzaddik is real. When you hear a story like this, hopefully it brings you a little closer to that. Okay, so Yeshar Koach, everyone. We'll sing a short linkum. Continue next week. Bezat Hashem.